quick on it on.
Oh, I'm sorry, I had already
We're
clicked.
live now. There is no
All right,
waiting.
That's all
all
good.
right.
It's background. It's all like this. You're witnessing the behind the scenes. Welcome to the episode. This is Beat People Podcast, episode 68. The classic SP1200 is the topic of the day. Last time we did the MPC, and we still have a part two to do, right? So I just kind of feel like we're gonna do these for all the classic joints, and so yeah, right now, Ken, stop goofing around with my production, buddy.
I'll do what I want.
So yeah, this is an SP1200 episode. Why are they so freaking appealing after all these years? So sought after, and yeah. So we just want to kind of get into this conversation. I got a really dope panel right now of folks who who I respect, who would be good for the conversation. We got Ken. What's up, man?
I'm not good for any conversation.
Yeah, actually, that's true. I shouldn't have said that. Then we got we got Upright. Upright is actually becoming a regular again. That's dope. Welcome back, man. You muted.
How did his sound just disappear?
Oh, my bad. What's up?
There he goes.
There you go. There you go. And then we got the Daydream sound.
What
Daydream sound. I know people, recognize the Daydream sound as one of the authorities on classic samplers and stuff on the internet, and he's probably answered a lot of questions for a lot of people about a lot of old dope machines because he probably has every one of them at this point. And then we got my man Strange Strains. You all may know Mario as product specialist from Electron. You probably saw him rocking the model cycles and the model samples, and we become homeboys from around different synth events and different things. So I knew that Mario is probably a little younger than all of us, but he owns a SP1200 and he's a beat head. He's a gear head, and he's making beats and lo-fi, hip hop, and all kinds of stuff. And he combines the SP1200 with a lot of the newer gear. And so I wanted to have him on, and let's have this discussion, man. Why y'all think the SP1200 is so still one of those kind of revered machines after all these years? We got a million. Not clones, but machines that are maybe inspired by them, and then softwares and plugins and emulations that are all kind of inspired by the SP1200. Why y'all think that is at this point?
Want to start?
Yo,
Anybody?
Personally, I would say, coming from my perspective, you put it, perfectly. I would say, coming from the box and trying to experiment with sounds and getting textures and finding the textures that you want, finally rooting that sound that I was looking for to a sampler that's an older sampler and that was hardware, and specifically the SP1200. And it's everybody knows it's that sound that when you start digging into the hip hop collection, start hearing the samples, and I think
it's recognizable. You recognize it right off, right? That particular distinct sound.
Yeah, and then just also the what do you mean? Yeah, like that seeking out for that. I went and finally using one of these, you get that instantly. Like, you don't have to add a chain, you don't have to open up a chain and find the better algorithm or change it and add LFOs, because it's just, I remember when I heard it, I was just blown away. Like, in heaven, I was like, damn, this is crazy. Like, all the search for getting this grittiness, it's just the box does it itself. So that's for my personal thing.
You know what? I want to jump in here and say something real quick, because the other day, Corry, Ken, and a bunch of us, we were talking in a chat, and I think you shot out a link to a SP plugin, right? And I listened to some demos of that, and the first thing that hit me was like a mod ring, sort of a bit crush kind of sound. You know what I mean? And that's like So that's real distinctive to that SP sound. You know what I mean? I don't know if I could pull up. I'll try to get an example.
Well, that's one of the that's something that about the SP, and I kind of think that this also lends to why it's still so used today, is there's a lot of legend around the SP1200. A lot of it's not true, and then there's also a lot of good reasons why it's still around as well. But like, there's this whole, especially for aspiring beat makers that are kind of newer to it, there's a lot of like jargon that gets thrown around that's completely inaccurate and like way off base, but it gets its own kind of mentality around it, and you start hearing people say like, oh yeah, it's got this ring, and then you hear people say mod ring, and then which it's not, like, you know, and I'm not calling you out saying, oh, that's inaccurate. I'm saying like this has become, it's almost become its own vernacular. You know what I mean? Like, it's the SP1200 has its own lingo around it now, to where you almost like you're fighting a losing battle talking to people about, okay, well, this is specifically this sound, or this is specifically that sound, because people have it so ingrained in their mind as far as like, oh, this is what I'm hearing, even though they're describing it with inaccurate terms. You just have to kind of be like, okay, well, it's actually this, but, you know, and keep it moving, you know? Mm-hmm. I think Daydream's done quite a lot of videos on the sound of the SP, so I kind of like to hear his take on it. And you also do a lot of your live streams where you're chatting with people about it, so I'd like to kind of get your take on the common folks who reply to you and talk to you about this stuff.
I think, yeah, a lot of it is it's just a historical box, and I'd say historically speaking, the SP came at the right time, like the perfect time. I mean, hip hop all started off with records, then we went full drum machine. Here comes the SP, and then you had drum machines that had a little bit of sampling in it, like the SP12 had that, and then the SP is the first, as far as I know, that just was a straight sampler and a drum machine. So now we can do things that we wanted to always do with records with a drum machine. You could have never done that. Like, you had a DMX and that was just a straight drum machine. So now you had drum machines drum sounds that you could take from records. So it was like at the right time, like right when the SP1200 came out, that's when everything started changing. You know, if you listen, everything just switched up. You didn't even hear like a Lindrum or anything like that anymore. Like, that was all done. So even
that's interesting. I never thought about that, but that's
like
true.
That's
a good point.
You know, the SP was, and it was cheap for the most part. Yeah, like it was sub $3,000. It was really, really, I think, $2,500. You know, in those times. So that's cheap compared to any other sampler. So it changed up everything. And
that's the other thing, is that you have to remember that, like, back then, it wasn't like you couldn't get FL Studio. You couldn't get, like, there weren't cheaper options. Like, EMU was the cheap option back in the day. Like that, like, and $4,000 was the cheap option. $3,000 was the cheap option back in the day.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah. So it's held its like importance because of that throughout time. Like, once you start using an SP, a lot of people didn't go looking anywhere else. You know, I heard, I think it was Primo. He was saying like somebody had to actually tell him about the MPC 60 because he didn't even think about it. He was just on
because it worked. This was what it was.
It worked.
And it was that sound. And so why change up?
Yeah, and that still holds till today, I think. Like, as far as the sound goes, what Strange is saying is right. Like, the minute you put something in an SP and it comes back on you, it's super hard. Like, it's noticeably like, why is this thing so dense? Like, anything you put in there slaps like immediately. So it's pretty impressive.
Hey, so just for a little bit of context, I can share my screen. I'm here on Bboytechreport.com, and this is that SP plugin, and it's you know, supposed to be true to the sound, just so people can get a feel for what exactly
I'll throw it up
the sound we're talking about. Okay, yeah. So I can share my screen if you want, or
there you go.
Okay. And then let me see here.
That thing sounds dope, man.
It does. It sounds incredible. I have a video pulled up right here. Let's see. Share my screen. And then
cool. I don't know if you have the video routed too. So yeah, audio routed. So yeah, share it up.
Can you guys hear that?
No.
No.
I can't hear it. But the dope thing about that plugin, at least what I thought was really dope about the plugin, is one, I mean, it's easy enough to just kind of grab it and get that sound, and it has a couple of parameters to kind of dial a sound in, which I'll tell you the truth, the idea of something like that seems to be more of a common thing today was not common just 5 years ago. You know what I'm saying? Just 10 years ago, 12 years ago, whatever, you could keep going back, and it just wasn't common, and people were doing all kinds of stuff to try to get that sound, or, you know, sacrificing a limb to go buy a real one. You know what I'm saying? And it's a pretty elusive machine. And then when you look and see these prices, what are the prices? I mean, here's one, and it's $5,000, and that sounds cheap to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, that's what's wild right now.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah,
that's crazy, man.
And there's a reason for that. I think, well, there's a whole nother conversation that we can get into about the pricing of these things. You know, I think we could all make the argument that is just ridiculous. But then at the same time, because there's a level of price gouging, and, you know, people kind of living off the you know, the clout chasing of it, the hype of it. But the reality is, it's an amazing box, and I think some of these places that are selling them like that might be taking advantage of folks. But at the same time, can you really say that? Because some of the world's best guitarists and famous guitars are like crazy. Like, the amount of money people pay for guitars, that are classic guitars. So yeah, you know what I mean? So yeah, it's kind of dope. I like what you said though, Mario, about the fact that, and you too, Daydream Sound, the fact that when you throw something in the real SP1200, there's no more wondering about why there's all this fanfare around it. You know what I mean? No more. Like, the drums that come off of SP1200 are something special. Like, straight up. And I don't know, I personally feel like the emulations that I've seen in software side, and I'm going to try this other one that we just talked about, but I feel like it nails the aliasing and the crunch. A lot of times those things are nailed, but the punch is not easy to nail. You know what I mean? So
I'd say like, so I have an Emax that I love, and the thing about the Emax that I love is, one, obviously they're like less than a third of the price of a SP1200. The sampling engine is extremely similar. However, it's different in the way that it handles interpolation and drop sampling. But you get the same filters and, you know, same filter chips, but they're completely dynamic, meaning you can actually control them as opposed to a capacitor discharging and controlling cutoff. But even with that, like, even when you go to some of these other very related, you know, samplers back in the day, the thing is that Dave Rossum, the genius that he was literally creating the chips himself, was literally creating all of this himself. And because of that, everything has a very, very distinctive tone. The Emax, while it can get a beautiful crunch, and I actually love it because you can do variable sample rate on it, so you can actually go lower than the SP12 and SP1200, and you can do some really interesting things with it. The difference is that the SP1200 was, because it was a drum sampler, he looked at it as, it doesn't need to be as crisp. It doesn't need to be as hi-fi for the time. So he allowed for things like it would just drop sample, you know, and it would get more grungy. And you don't really reproduce that sound in any other way. So when you have something that dirty, you know, yeah, you can put it through the filters, and it's cool because the filters will grab onto that dirt and grab onto that aliasing and that grit. And you can do some cool stuff with that. Really, that's not what the SP was truly about, because it's not like you were boosting resonance and sweeping in and hanging on to the harmonics of that aliasing. You know what I mean? Like, if you're in a synth, or if you're in a modern sampler that can change variable sample rates and do that sort of thing, you have the ability to boost resonance on filters and then hone in on specific harmonics. And with a low sample rate like that, you're getting inharmonic aliasing going on, right? So you're getting inaccurate harmonics that are popping out, which give it that sound, and then you can latch onto it with the resonance of a filter and boost that up even more and do some interesting things. But on the 1200, to me, it was more about just letting it do what it does, like keeping the filters kind of more open and just letting like involving yourself in the grit and using the grit to work for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense. You know what? CC Funk 1 said the first time I saw SP1200, a friend got one. I went to his house to see it. The sound was great, but as soon as I touched the buttons, I hated it. And that's one of the things I've always seen with the SP. It's like click, 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 click. You know, and in this day of like, you know, soft pads, I've never touched the SP. But for those that have, can you speak to that? Like, what's that like?
Oh, so I can tell you, I had a homeboy that had a SP12, and I pull this up and that comment for the reason that I totally agree. Back in the day, when my guy had the SP12, I mean, by that time, MPCs were very well known and very widely used. And I couldn't stand those hard clicky buttons on the SP1200, bro. I admitted that I love the sound, but those clicky buttons, I was like, I can't even deal with that. So it never appealed for me. But over the years, you just know that sound is so like over time, I became like, I could actually probably deal with those buttons because that sound is so hard to grab anywhere else. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know if anybody else felt that way, but I definitely felt that way.
Yeah, I think you get used to it. It's like, to me, I didn't really think about it. The thing I would relate it most to is like if you've ever used like an Electron product, like one of the older ones. That's what it feels like. It's not foreign, but I think like that's what drum machines were like. The first drum machine I think had pads on it was the Lin 9000. Before that, you know, the DMX, the Lindrum, they're all these hard type of things.
Clicky buttons, right?
Yeah, that's where the SP kind of that's its you know, that's where it comes from. But I think the more you use it, you don't even notice it anymore.
Yeah, and really you could see the evolution because like you see Ensoniq, who was bought by EMU, you know, eventually, like, you know, Ensoniq kind of went that middle road where it's like they had the ASRX had those pads, but dude, they felt like buttons. They were so hard, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But Mario, you know, also the thing too is that I felt like when the Digitac came out, it was almost like a kind of a salute to the SP1200 because of the way the buttons were, and quite frankly, I mean, it kind of forces you to work in a certain workflow that's reminiscent of old machines.
Definitely, yeah, I totally agree, and that's kind of how like I had access to this SP1200 before the Digitac was out, and my appeal to it wasn't there yet. So when I finally, you know, fast forward, Digitac's out, start using that, and then being like, wait, you know, 8 tracks, there's 8 tracks here too. Okay, cool. And then these buttons, and that's kind of like the button. I was at first coming from a started making beats. I wanted those MPC pads, like just needed those. But over time, working on the Digitac, I got this, you know, Digitac, this tactile feeling, and the action on it actually really helps. Like coming back, the pads are good, definitely for getting the velocity and stuff. But they're like Daydream Sam was saying, you get used to it, and you know, it kind of it is a totally different feeling than the pads for sure. But I find it kind of appealing as well to the sound of it. And then with the Digitac coming from there, like I said, I just kind of got used to these type of buttons. It is way different, you know, a lot more responsive on the Digitac than the SP, but you get that same idea, and it kind of feels too like you know, you are playing this instrument. You have to deal with, you know, on a guitar if you have a different type of string on a cello, whatever.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it is, you know, when I started thinking about like that, and each device, like I'm glad you brought up the old Electron, how it was like that, and it reminded you too. And coming, you know, kind of being biased and a little spoiled, having access to all the Electron devices, I found it really liking that type of feel. I do still go back to the pads, but it's just like these buttons. Like,
yeah, when I'm on Electron, I use the buttons, but like not not to be rude, but it's because the electron pads are just not good for finger drumming. So it's like, well, if that's the case, well then I might as well just punch it in with the buttons. But at the same time, it changes your mindset as far as how you're doing things, because it becomes less about playing something in velocity wise. It becomes more about like, okay, this is when I want to trigger, and I want to trigger in this specific way at this specific time, and it becomes more about that. And with the SP, it's really cool because you have the faders there, and you can kind of ride your faders, and like changing your pitch that way is really, and your velocity too. It's such a different workflow. It's unlike anything else really. Like I can't think of anything else that has those types of controls laid out in a fader way like that.
Yeah. And also too, I mean, I think of it when, in my head, I wanted to just finger drum everything, but in reality, I don't do live drumming on sequencing. I'm like, get the sample, get that loop for a little bit. All right. Then put the hi-hat. So, those pads are nice. I really like it, but I find myself even just working like with what the device has to offer. And, but with this, coming with that back on the buttons, somebody said the contacts get messed up easily, and that's kind of my issue with this right now. I need to get it serviced, so I've been using the Digitact MIDI track out, and it feels exactly the same because it's the same kind of streamlined workflow and just working over here, using encoders here. So that's kind of cool. If you do an NPC, you could send out the MIDI track run and automatically.
That makes sense.
What's going on with the audio? It all of a sudden like
audio faded a little bit.
I probably went back from the mic. Sorry.
Oh, okay, no problem.
That's something that Anthony B is saying. He was like, I always midied up my SP1200 to an MPC 2000 XL, and then MV8800 because I'd rather break those than the SP1200. So he's literally using a different interface, but still getting the crunch and the grit, the sound.
Yeah, luckily the actual buttons aren't that. That's not a difficult service to have done. Luckily, because it's literally tack switches. So it's it's kind of an on-off kind of deal, which is cool. But just the interface in general on the SP is like such a. If you look at where the evolution was, clearly things evolved from the Lin side of things way more than the SP side of things. Like clearly it was like the industry was like, okay, velocity sensitive pads, 16 pad layout, that became the standard, and then it moved on from there. But there is it's all about that workflow change. It's like whether you're on a modular, and I was talking to somebody the other day who was asking me about doing sampling in modular, and I said, well, it really depends on what you want from that, and the person was like, oh, well, I have an MPC 1000 and I really want to do that in a modular. And I was like, well, that's exactly why you shouldn't do sampling in a modular. I was like, you should do sampling in a modular for what the MPC can't do. Right. You know what I mean? Like you want to do everything that you're not doing in a typical thing. And that's how I feel about the SP UI is it's like you want to program beats on an SP the way that you program beats on an SP. If you listen to like those old Evil D tracks, like that's like one of my favorite SP users is Evil D, and I feel like he doesn't
actually you can't front on Evil D is a monster on that SP.
You listen to a lot of that stuff and you can hear things that are just like you just don't do those on MPC. Like I primarily, like the bulk of me comes from like an MPC style background, but where I started was like we used to sample on like we would grab samples from a Gemini little 5-second sampler on a DJ mixer and then record that and then bring it to the lab where the SP was and then drop it to that and then program the actual beat on that. And the thing about that is like you sequence everything out, and the way you layer sounds is so different from an MPC and so different from everything else. It's just like, and you just need to embrace that workflow and go with it,
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to go back to this guy, Kahari Mays. He asked the question about how we run the SP into, for tracking. I typically do it, into an interface, my interface that I have, or into my Digitact or something to process that sound and sequence it in here to use the sequencer tricks on the Digitact. So usually just going direct in, don't really do any processing of the actual sound unless I'm going into Ableton and I want to get other textures or stuff like that.
Yep.
How about Daydream? I'm curious to how you do that.
When I use it, I go direct. A lot of the times I don't even use the individual outs. I'm pretty lazy with it. I'll just take the mix out. You no matter what.
Amen for being lazy with it. There's like
Mix out.
say it louder for the people in the back. There's nothing wrong with 2-tracking. Come on.
Yeah,
exactly.
it's pretty. You'll get something good out of it anyway. But I rarely these days use the SP for any sampling anymore. For what I do,
you got
it's
a lot of
little bit-
options too, though. So
it's really, really noticeable, and it's pretty present. But what I do think is great about what I do is I use all the outputs on the back. The CV outputs, the SEMT outputs play really well with modular, and you won't find that mix on very many drum machines. Like it has SEMT out, so you can use the SP. Or you can use modular to clock the tempo of the SP, and through that you can use the SP as a interface for the rest of your rig. So I can have an LFO on a modular device changing the tempo of the SP and everything else in my studio because of that.
That's great.
And
that's crazy.
that's kind
You
of
did a video. You did a video on that too. I'm pretty positive because I remember watching that and I was like, I was so happy that you were doing this stuff because like nobody else was doing that, and I'm like, man. This was actually a fresh take on how to use the SP. So I was, dude, I'm a fan. Like I was so happy that you did that. I was just like, that's the kind of that's the producer right there doing that.
It's really
sure,
a Swiss Army knife, man. Like the sound of it, like it's the sound, but like the amount of other things it can do, and it's really, really easy and quick to use. I think that's some of the it's underrated. Like when you use it, you'll be surprised how quick you just fly across it. And like if you sit down with it for an hour, by the end of that hour, you'll be moving quicker than you thought you would have. Like everything kind of makes sense. You don't have to think like, okay, how do I do this? Everything
That's it. Yeah, it's
really,
like a very
really quick.
finite space. It's a very finite space, and it doesn't like have you like feeling like you're wandering in all these nooks and crannies, of other gear where it's just like, hey, this is what it is, and just work with that, and when you do that, you start discovering yourself a little bit. You start discovering, oh, well, like, it's not just, and I feel like that about a lot of gear too, it's where it's like, if you limit yourself in a very specific way, you find out that, okay, this is how I'm going to express myself, and you'll still sound like you, but you'll sound like you who's like solving problems and whatnot, especially if you're exposed to modern workflow and you're like, okay, well, I know that this is possible, but now I'm on this, this time traveling situation back in the day.
It's almost like most people who have that know themselves and they're comfortable with themselves as a producer, right? It's like seeing the world through regular glasses versus seeing the world through shades. Like the gear that you use, you should still be able to sound like yourself, but maybe you're gonna sound like yourself through an SP1200. You know what I mean? Like it's just a different shade that you're putting on, like, so to speak.
I got a major question for both of you guys that have SPs. What's the resolution, the PPQ in?
I don't know. I think they just.
Sorry, my mic was muted. If I recall, oh my god, I just had a conversation about this the other day, and if I screw this up, people are gonna freak out on me. I had a conversation about. I want to say it was actually
yes,
like
they are,
something
Ken.
crazy.
So get it right, baby.
It's like it's 24 if I'm correct. Hold on, I really need to dive back into my emails, but I'm pretty positive it was 24.
Oh, it's 24.
It's 24.
Yeah. The reason why it's twisted in my head is because everything that I've been doing lately is actually double. Because like I'm working on the S2400 project, and the S2400 has two modes. So it has the original mode, which is like kind of doing everything that an SP1200 does, and then it has a hi-fi mode, which is essentially doubled of everything. You know what I mean? So it's like you're gonna basically double. Actually, it's more than double, but anyway, but it's going in quantifiable numbers in that way. So yeah, the PPQ, like that's one of the things that we were talking about is because we had, and I don't want to have Brad or anybody get upset with me, but we were having a strong conversation about swing and about how the SP handles swing, how the SP handles quantization, how the SP handles jitter. Like all these factors kind of all come together, and they create the sequence that it is, you know? So there's all these weird little factors in there. So obviously if you, for one, the SP does not swing the way a lot of people think that it swings. And if you research it on the internet, most of the internet's information is completely wrong. I'm not going to expose all this stuff on here because I feel like that wouldn't really be my place right now. No. I'm not going to expose exactly how it does swing because, like, you know, that's what they've been doing is actually studying, okay, well, what notes actually swing and where do they swing and by how much and all that kind of thing. Because they want to recreate that extremely accurately. But I will say this. Every bit of information that we've seen on the internet is incorrect. And there was some extensive study work done on that. And however, I'll also say this. The jitter of the clock is a really interesting aspect of it because not only do you have swing, but then you have like this strange jitter. And jitter is subtle. Like, don't think that jitter is some massive thing. Like, jitter is more subtle than wow and flutter is on a turntable or a tape deck. You know, put it that way. You know, it's a very subtle thing, but it makes all the difference in the world when you're dealing with timing. Like, keep in mind, like we've been dealing with camera latency and that sort of thing when we're dealing with streams and whatnot. Just sit there and tap on a desk doing 16th notes and then notice, like, you know, even with your iPhone camera, how any kind of like wavering of timing difference you can notice because musical minds, it's all about like precision math, you know?
Yo, C-Funk said 24 PPQ, wow. And I
yeah, that's sloppy.
Statement. It's like,
that's a really low, you know.
Yeah, that's really tight. It's like you can't get too expressive with that. You know what I mean?
No.
Well, no. That's
Well,
that's just it though. Is you can get expressive with it, but it's going to be a little bit of expressive back to you.
You can literally notice it.
It's going to say no.
No. Yeah.
So, and for the layman in the chat, like, let's just kind of break down what that means. So that's pulses per quarter note, right? Or parts per quarter note. Yeah.
Right.
So basically what that means is that you're going to be slicing up each time slot in between each quarter note, right? And that's where the data can fall. Now the data can fall. So like, let's say like that's a 24 is like this. That's a chunk like that. An MPC, the lowest MPC was 96. So that's like tiny, like this.
Yeah, and the 4000 was 960.
Yeah, exactly. You know,
60 parts per quarter note. So that's a crazy resolution. You can pretty much do whatever you want. You know, it's like free time.
Well, if you can't, then you probably should find something else.
And then if you look at an analog sequencer, they're one. Like it's like you know, it's because it's one step. So and that's where a lot of people get into the whole like I want to swing off grid, this and that.
Right.
So not only can you can still program kind of off grid, but then it also has the machine has a slop to it as well.
So that's my question for these guys. Like, do you find that 24 PPQ restrictive? And, how do you approach that?
I'll answer. Like, for me, you just kind of work with it. What it gives you back, you tend to like it. You know, even though you know right away, it's like, that's not what I played. It kind of puts it in this kind of stiff kind of swing. And you're like, okay, fine, you know. So it kind of works.
I dig it. I get that.
Yeah. Sometimes you'll be like, no, I would really like to play this, and that's when you get into the idea of speeding up the time to get what you want. You know. So, but yeah, a lot of the times it you kind of like what it does.
Dope.
Okay. Yep, that makes sense.
So I think so.
Me,
hold on. Go for it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that it's just like something that I've learned to just go with, and it's the fact that you have it only has a little bit sample time too. You got to deal with that. The fact that it has these clicking buttons, it's kind of one of those things where, when you do getting it on paper compared to all the other stuff, it's like, yeah, that sucks. But when you're actually using it, you remember, okay, like you said, you tend to like it, and you are gonna have times where you want it to do something else, but then it's kind of just just let it go and see what comes out.
Got you. Yep. Yeah.
So I wanted to. I looked up. There's this link. Fact Magazine did a story a while ago. I think this has been a while. 15 samplers that shaped modern music and the musicians who used them. And then as I scrolled through this, I saw this SP12, the blue joint, and it reminded me of a story that I feel like is apropos for this show. And I think I've told it on Beat People before, but yo, I've said before, my guy had an SP12. I don't remember how he got it. We was broke. I don't know how he got an SP12. And that was during the time when like this wasn't a common device to have. It wasn't, I don't know how the hell he got an SP12. He came across it somehow. He probably bought it on, I don't know, back then we probably a reader in Chicago. Anyway, he had this SP12 and we tried to use it and we couldn't save it because it had some connector on the back, and he was kind of getting used to using it. And he also had an MPC. Here's the deal. Because it was broken and it wasn't very common to know, I think we had researched and found out we could send it someplace to get repaired, but like I said, we were broke. You know what I'm saying? So he just kind of pushed the joint aside, and we knew it was a dope joint, but it wasn't usable in its state. So he pushed it aside, and we just kept using the MPC. Years later, after I really got the bug and started making my own beats and got really deep into I hit him up. I was like, yo, whatever happened to that SP12 you had? He was like, bro, so it was in my car. A car that I didn't use no more, and he was like, that car got towed and it was so old and rickety. He said the cops came to his door and was like, sir, we towed your car. I guess it got stolen or towed or something, I don't know. And he's like, we found your car and it's in the pound, and you know, you may have some stuff in there that you might want to come and get if you want to come get your car. He's like, nah, I don't care about that car, keep it, I don't care, I'm not paying to get that car. And he said he remembered like a year later, like, oh no, my SP12 was in the back of the car.
Man, hey, that was probably worth more than the whole car.
The whole car. Exactly.
I just want to say, I don't like scary stories like that. I know I'm gonna have a nightmare. Like, that's horrible. That is
a horrible
horrible
story. But it's true. It's true. Yeah, well, imagine that car got smashed and that SP12 was in the back of it, right? That's ridiculous. But hey, so I'm like, gonna go for it. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's just one of those things where you hear about people having just classic gear and just forgetting about it or whatever, and also like the prices for those things they were dipped for a long time, and then it just it was a steady climb back up, and then all of a sudden it just spiked and went into the atmosphere. You know, somebody had mentioned in the chat earlier about the Rossum, what was it, the 1200 reissue, and how that was $7,500, and people are paying
that's
it.
crazy.
You know?
That's
people
crazy.
are paying it.
Yeah.
I think that there's a reason why it was done, but yeah, people are paying it. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Hey, I got a question. So for Daydream Sound and Mario as well. So as far as the SP, when it comes to your workflow, is that the final destination for your full track, or are you producing in the SP? How is your workflow with the SP? Because I can imagine myself, like I use a SP404, and I'm not really so much producing in the SP, but I'll run everything through the SP as a final destination to get that sound. So talk about that a little bit. Yeah.
For myself, I've yet to like fully do a full beat sequenced out on the SP1200. I've done a few things where like I'll sequence just a loop, but then I'll move for the drums, go to Digitact, or just run the sample in here and do the different pitch levels, throw that in Digitact or Octatrack, and you know, mangle it there. So yeah, it's for right now, but I've been using it heavily more just for like an effects unit, I would say, just to get the actual SP sound.
Yep.
But that's my next step. The main reason is because of the buttons that like only like 3 of them, they all work, but only few of them are really, really responsive. So my workflow is a lot faster here, but I could totally see myself working on this when it, you know, up everything working good because all of the workflow stuff that you need to know is on the panel. Like not everything, but kind of navigating is like very straightforward. So I could see myself doing that and having a lot of fun.
Okay.
Yeah, man. It just fits. It's more of a tool for me. I think I got it with that in mind. It's really, really aggressive for my taste. So what I'll do is just a snare, just a hi-hat, just a pitch down thing, because it has a tendency to be it's so prominent in whatever you put it in, and it's noticeable.
Wow.
So half the time I'm trying to tame it down rather than to play it up. So that's kind of like, and it all depends on your musical style. Like if you make hard music, well, you're good to go.
Yeah.
But very rarely will I use it.
Which is why in boom bap hip hop of that classic time in New York, it kind of was the thing. Because New York hip hop literally sounds like the damn concrete that they walk on. You know what I mean? That's East Coast hip hop. It literally sounds like the way the city looks.
It's crazy.
Hard.
Rough, rugged, and raw.
Yeah. So as a driver, more I'm using it for CV, but every now and then, like I want, it's so fun to use. That's the thing about it. And I have this thing with samplers where that if it's too good, I almost leave it alone more than use it. Like this and the Mirage, I kind of don't want to touch them a lot because they're that good, So it's that type of thing.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And here's I think we were going for the same thing. Is there anybody using the SP1200 for music other than boom bap? And I think that's another thing that comes up often enough when we talk about classic samplers. A lot of times we're talking about these classic samplers from a hip hop lens. And the fact of the matter is a lot of these things were used to make a lot of house music. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
for hip hop.
You know what I mean? And even R&B and other stuff. I mean, honestly, because I was surprised when I would see R&B and house dudes, and they would have an MPC or they would have a SP1200. So this is very prevalent in those music styles. As a matter of fact, Brad from Isla Instruments, who's making the S2400, is he's a house DJ. He's all into house music. Like that's his perspective, and he loves it just as much as any hip hop head.
Yep, definitely. I've seen a few people. I mean, not a few. I've seen a lot of people using, not just SP1200, but every specific like hip hop sampler that you see, MPC, SP, even 404. I've seen that in like house music, techno, doing all this stuff, and it all roots back for me on the SP and the MPC. It's just that sound, like Daydream Sound was saying, just like that punch. That dance music, you need something hard hitting, and this dose up, you throw your kick in here and there you go.
Yep. That's what's up. And so I want to also jump back to, so we've talked a lot about why it's classic and how it's out there. I mean, the aftermarket prices and stuff, and we even talked about the software. I think it's called a S950, which, by the way, that software is interesting because it takes the sort of aliasing sort of sound and the lo-fi sort of sound and marries it with the sweetness of the filter of the S950, which a lot of people were using stuff like that. The SP1200 and S950 as a combination. That software actually takes those two characteristics from those two things and combines it in a software. It gives you dials that you can map to things like this. Things like that to be able to control it and automate. So that's actually a super cool thing. But on the flip side, there just seems to all of a sudden be a lot of interest. And I think my man Brad at Isla Instruments has done the SP1200 a service by creating the S2400. And he's gotten the blessings of had conversations with Dave Rossum and stuff. And, it's dope to see hardware SP1200s, a modern version. Mind you, this is going to be different than that, but it's dope to see something that's inspired by that coming to market and getting the job done. Because when it finally releases, it's going to have all the OG features on deck. Then it'll probably You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, and it will probably have other stuff, and all the IO alone throws it into the future. You know what I mean?
For sure. Yep.
Yeah, that's one of the
Super
things that
dope.
I was super excited about, was just when using it. At first, it was just like, oh, it's just gonna be like seeing the 24. I was in my head, I was like, oh, they're just trying to emulate the sound, cool. But I saw the dope thing is that he's like, Brad,
He's super open with everything that he's doing about it, which is really dope.
So it's cool seeing that, and then working on the SP, being like, damn, this would be actually really dope if there was a different interface, and if they really nail that sound and the workflow in a kind of updated thing, then that kind of, I don't need to have this split MIDI controller with the SP. Like, that would be pretty interesting to use. But yeah, I'm still very curious on that comparison. I know there's going to be millions of comparison videos when it comes out, but
as soon as that drops, there's going to be, you are damn right, there's going to be a million comparison videos.
Looking forward to that.
Let me ask y'all though, what y'all think about that kind of thing, where, like, for instance, he says, anybody looking to buy SP1200, is it better to get the S2400 instead due to modern improvements? And I think that's going to be a real sort of talk. Like, think about when the Model D, when Moog created the new Model D, and then there was still a lot of naysayers out there like, son, I want the regular old ass Model D. Like, even that was Moog.
I think there's layers to the question though. Like, so there's so many layers to the question, because one of the main things that you could say, like, straight out from the gate is, guess what? Even if you want an SP1200, eventually you will not be able to buy an SP1200. They will not last forever, period.
For sure.
And they're old. I mean, you're talking about a 1980s device, so
older than me. Even
with excellent technicians out there repairing these things, they won't last forever, So there's that. The other thing is that, and I say this completely biased as somebody who's involved in the project and all, if you're trying to buy something to replace something else that's not that's never gonna work. Like, don't ever buy, like, don't buy like the Poly D saying, oh well, it has to. I've just been having like it in my heart for forever to have a Model D, and now there's the Poly D, so I'm just gonna get that. And it's like, no, you're still gonna want a Mini Moog Model D. Like, even if you have that, like, you will.
For me,
it's not, man. I kind of disagree with that.
You might be able to get. Hey, you might be able to get.
I kind of disagree with that.
You might be able to get 99% of the sound, but guess what? It's still not that. You know what I mean? And a lot of people, it's not just about buying the circuit, or just about buying this, or just about buying that. If you're dead set on having exactly that, then you're dead set on having exactly that. Like, there's just no difference there. However, if you're trying to get like a very similar sound, a similar workflow and interest, then that's something, that's something else, and that will get you there. Like, at least that's the plan. So.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Sorry, I see another part of it as well too. I mean, live performers that do live music, say they do want to take a SP1200 sound with them, you're not going to want to take that on tour with you. SP2400, that's another thing. So that's kind of in my head. Same thing with the Model D, like that whole thing. You could buy the Poly D and take that on tour with you and be good, and have your Model D at home for the studio. So I think there's kind of, like you said, there is layers to the question.
That's a good observation, a good use case for it too.
Yeah, definitely. For myself, it's like, if I find out that I really need this in a live setting, well, if the 2400 has that same workflow and same feel, then perfect. I'm going to take this on, because it's going to last longer. I know it could get service. I know it has updates and stuff like that, and more like different implementations and expanded improvements. So that's personally on my note, that would be a pretty cool reason to have one as well with the regular 1200. But not everybody has the luxury of having a SP1200, so I could see the being torn between the two.
Yeah, and that argument works. That argument works in a lot of ways too. I mean, I'm sitting here with a Rhodes piano behind me. A lot of players have Rhodes pianos, and they may be the keyboardists in a band and be live musicians, but they're not carrying their Rhodes out.
No.
They may go and rock it, and then that's why they would have like a Korg SB1 or something similar with or some role in a Yamaha joint that has an incredible EP in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they're rarely going to be taking their actual Rhodes out. And so that's a real use case.
Mm-hmm. Yo, two things. Ken, did OJ's asking a question here. Did Brad mention anything about the PPQ on the 2400?
Yeah, the 2400 PPQ is going to be 7,933. No, I'm kidding.
You lying? Okay, I was about to say.
What do you mean?
It's what I mentioned before. No, it's what I mentioned before. So it's 24, and then you can go in multiples above that. So as of right now, you can double that. So because a common usage of the 1200 was to double time it.
Right.
And with this. With the S2400,
I just want to put this at the screen right now.
Time it without having to double time it. So you get that 48.
What's going on, Brad?
Oh, Brad's commenting. Yeah, Brad's in the chat now. So yeah. So there you go. So
he said you're a sexy MF.
I don't want to say about that.
So directly from Brad, 48 PPQ.
48
PPQ.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's doubled up. So
okay.
The thing to me about like if someone's in the market for a 1200 and they're looking at a newer product that's going to scratch that itch, I don't think there's anything closer. Not at the moment.
Yeah.
So there's nothing to me. Again, it gets back to a lot of the whole workflow and UI of it. It's like where else are you going to get faders like that? Now, yeah, you can map out MIDI controllers and do all kinds of crazy stuff like that. But let's be honest with you, like, dude, that's not fun.
Like, no doubt. I gotta give props to this thing, man. I mean, it's sexy.
It is for sure.
Machine. And I'll be honest too.
Let me see if I can find one.
I'll be honest too. The first time I saw it, like I think it's initially a thing like, hey, what's going on here? You know what I mean? But like when I look at him, like as he's put it together and you see the actual prototypes come together, this is a really good looking machine. And
it looks like the spiritual successor to the SP12. It looks like the
modernization
very next version
of it.
Yep.
Yeah. Another thing is too that I'll say it again. I've said on other shows, but on here I'll say it. This thing is built like a tank. That kind of terminology, built like a tank for music gears, thrown around kind of willy nilly, but it's not. I'm not mincing words here. This joint is built like a tank. It actually, you feel the weight on it.
Nice.
It's not paper weighted kind of thing. You feel the weight on it. Those sides are thick.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's like a half-inch thick, and obviously Brad would know the exacts on it, and I mean it just has weight. I saw him at KnobCon and he was walking through there, he didn't have a booth. He was walking through there and he had an early like hand-built prototype of it, handmade or whatever prototype of it. And I dragged him over to Afro Rack's booth, like, put that down, let's talk.
So Ken, and maybe Brad can chime in. Is this true to the original as far as the circuitry, like all that, like the internals as far as like the sound?
So yeah, the actual the analog side of everything is pretty much a 1-to-1 recreation. It's like all the analog filters are the same. So there's a bunch of fixed filters in the SP1200, and then there's the quote dynamic filter, and the dynamic filter is now it's a SSI chip. It used to be SSM, same company, same stuff, So anyway, it's this SSI chip, and then it's basically a capacitor discharges it. So when you say dynamic, it's closing the cutoff. That's all done the same, except on this, it's stereo. So there's two of everything, right? Mm-hmm. So it's doubled up. That's all the same. In addition to that, you also have like digital filters and all that good stuff. Okay. Yeah, so it's identical plus more,
with enhancements. Yeah. Okay. Got you. Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting too.
And he said, and Brad is in here right now, and he's saying differences is that the analog side can be switched in and out in software rather than half plugging the jack. And what he's referring to that is, how
that's
on
a
the
good thing to mention.
on the SP1200 you could kind of pull the jack out halfway and get that ring sound. You don't have to do that with the S2400. You can actually tell it to do that. You can also tell it to bypass things, which is cool. Like it has internal logic chips that will handle that stuff.
Nice.
Dope.
Here,
Yeah.
Brad just sent
And
me.
The weight,
Go for
just
it.
so you know, the weight is the same as about
Wow.
a 2000 XL, if I recall correctly.
Nice.
Is it?
Yeah.
That's heavy, man. Like this is the
Yeah,
thing.
it's
Like
heavy.
the reason
it's not
why.
light.
Yeah, the reason why I asked is because the SP, as big as it is, it's light.
It's like
It's
Like, it will throw you off. Like when I first picked mine up, like I was bracing up. I'm going to lift this thing, and I almost threw it out of my hand because it was so light. Like, it's really light.
Like you were flipping it. Like, I'm gonna flip this
Yeah,
joint.
it's pretty light.
So this is the most recent casing for it, and you notice that it's a darker paint job. I don't know if that's like a dark gray or dark or black, but the other one was more grayish blue, like tinted gray. But this is a black piece.
Yeah. So basically, he's in the and I don't want to make this show like all S2400. I know.
I think it's appropriate. I think it's appropriate though, Ken, because we're talking about the SP1200, and we hit all of those marks on the things and how it's so beloved. But what the difference is here is that this is really the spiritual successor. So many people are prohibited from having an actual SP1200 because they're $5,000 to $8,000. And now here comes this thing that will give you that plus modern stuff at $1,000. That I think that's very relevant to throw into this conversation. I'm gonna throw it back up there again.
So there was a question in the chat that I just want to kind of get to, and I was going to type the answer, but I might as well just say it because I've had conversations with numerous people outside of Brad who've gotten to kind of play with certain things, so there's digital filters in this as well, and the developer of the code for the digital engine that's inside of this thing is very talented, and I've heard nothing but good things about these filters, and it's high praise coming from the people that I've talked to, and of course once I get involved on that, I nitpick digital filters to no end. So I'm looking forward to like the modernization of this old school UI, and I love like, I mean, I built my own sample rate reduction in my modular and in other things. Like, I do that kind of stuff all the time. OJ Miles is asking, what does Dave Rossum have to say about the spiritual successors? I spoke to him directly in person. I'll see if I can pull it up. So I spoke to Rossum himself at NAMM. And Corry, you were there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You came up towards the end of our conversation, right?
Yep.
And dude, Dave is an awesome guy. If you guys are watching on Corry's channel and not familiar with my channel, I have a show called the Synth Summit Show. Dave's come on my show before as well. Dave is a really, really great guy. Not only is he an absolute legend in the industry, who I will stand on the soapbox forever proclaiming to people that this is the true legend. Like, a lot of other synth legends get a lot of praise that realistically should have gone to Rossum. He built the voices and the chips and everything that made it possible for other synth legends to become synth legends. So I'm like a massive Dave Rossum fan. I spoke to him and I kind of pulled him aside after we spoke, and I was like, hey, Dave, like, I know you saw, what I've been involved in. What do you really think about this? And kind of like pulled him off the record to talk to him about it. He had nothing but good things to say. At the time, his only concern was, he was like, well, my only concern is that I just don't want people thinking that it's me doing it. I want them to know that it's Brad doing it. And I'll show you this right here. So check this out. Hold on. This is me and Dave right here. So he
And
said,
you look older with the gray hair.
I'm good looking. so
Yes,
no,
you are,
he
Ken.
just
You're very
basically
good
his
looking.
only concern was that he just wanted people to know that it was Brad making his own way, and that he fully supported it and was very happy with it. I know that Brad had his own personal conversation after NAMM with Rossum, and they get along great, and everything is all on the up and up. So I'm very happy about that, because to me that was also kind of an important thing, and I know it was to Brad too, because Brad really looks up to him as well. I mean, he wouldn't be doing this project if he didn't look up to him, you know. So
I think that's important to know too, that sometimes you just never know whether there's ill feelings or whether this is somebody feels like something is a smack in the face or what. But the great thing about the places that we can find ourselves in, like Ken and I and the rest of us, that we get a chance to talk to people like Rossum and people like Roger Lynn and all these people, and you get a chance to find out that like they're very gracious and very humble, and they could be egomaniacs and they're not.
I think I forget who it was that told the story about how they were saying like, yeah, I go to the grocery store, I do this, I do that, and like nobody cares, but I come here and I'm a superstar.
Yeah, no doubt, because they're cult heroes and stuff. And here's the thing that I wanted. Somebody asked something. This was way earlier in the broadcast. So it says, does anybody know what is the story of Emu disappearing? They made a lot of great samplers because
I know the story, but I'll let somebody else tell it, because I've been talking too much. So I'll let somebody.
I don't know that I know the whole story, but whoever wants to tell it.
I don't know the story, but I could tell you what it felt like.
All right, go for it.
Being an Ensoniq guy, it was becoming hard to get parts for my 16 plus. So, you get all these trade magazines, EQ magazine, all that, and all of a sudden you heard that Ensoniq merged with Emu. I was like, okay, fine. But then I realized there were no more, like Ensoniq just wasn't really servicing their old parts. So I heard that, and somewhere in the background, you were hearing that this company called Creative Labs, everyone knew Creative Labs because they made these little sound cards for, PCs. But they were set to own Emu. And Emu obviously was now Ensoniq, like they're one and the same. And that lasted for a while. And then soon after that, Creative Labs sort of deaded Emu, and that's been the story so far. If you actually go online, you can still go to the Emu website. The last thing they had was like sound cards and stuff like that. But as far as
sound fonts and all this kind of stuff,
yeah, like weird stuff. It didn't even look like
so
anything like a music company. That. Yeah, but they're that's it as far as that's what watching that happen. That's kind of what happened.
That's not it. The thing is like so many people think that like that was it. And it wasn't it. Like the crazy part is this. So yeah, EMU buys Ensoniq, right? EMU then gets taken over by Creative Labs, which then gets taken over by its Universal Audio, right?
Oh my goodness.
You know who Universal Audio is, right? Mm-hmm. So Apollos, all that kind of stuff. Guess who that is, right? So Rossum is also involved in SSI, which is, the chip manufacturing. Keep in mind, like a lot of these original filter designs and chips and stuff, that's all Security incubator. That's all Rossum, right? So here's the thing. The crazy part is that when Universal Audio bought all this, Rossum stayed on as the audio guy. Like Rossum's doing all this audio work behind the scenes, not getting the fame, not getting, any of that, the accolades, but it's Rossum behind Universal Audio doing all this great stuff. And granted, they got other amazing engineers as well, but so he's doing that. Universal Audio, much later on, we're getting much closer to present day, was really cool with Rossum. Probably because he does amazing work, I'm just guessing, and basically says, hey, you can do your own thing now. And Rossum starts up. That's when Rossum starts at the Rossum Electromu, which is his modular company. So a lot of people don't realize that EMU started at modular. Like way back in the day, they were making modular before Eurorack was a thing. It was they were basically taking like Moog circuits and cleaning them up and making them much better than what they were, like dropping noise floor, making them more stable, that sort of thing. So if you find like a vintage EMU modular, those things are worth crazy money because they're super high quality, right? So yeah, Rossum was now allowed to kind of do his own company kind of as an offshoot of Universal Audio, and that's Rossum Electromu. And now they've released some really they have a sampler for, you know, Eurorack, which is shoot, what's that thing called again? Assimilator, right? So they've got the Assimilator. They've got the Morpheus, which is really cool because if you know anything about the EMU history of their rack units and their synths, they had the Z-plane filter. And that Z-plane filter now exists in a Eurorack module, and the difference is that now the processors are much more powerful, so all the parameters can be interacted with in real time, which is before it was you only had limited parameters you could play with because it couldn't handle that kind of processing power.
And then you mentioned the filters, or him taking, doing, updating Moog circuits. The Evolution filter is kind of one of those things reincarnated into Eurorack. It's super so my favorite filter, period, without a doubt.
Yeah. I have it in my rack, and it's definitely one of my favorite filters.
The Assimilator is like the best sampler I've heard in a very, very long time.
So, and that's the thing is that
the sound of
that's the thing about Rossum is that
high end.
He approaches these things from a mindset of a musician and an audiophile. So it's like he understands when he's doing the raw baseline coding and setting up of a sampler chip or a sampler function. He knows like, okay, well, these frequencies aren't important. These frequencies are important. And he makes the chip. This was the thing about the old EMU stuff and why it sounded better, you know, more hi-fi than like the old Ensoniq stuff, was because he would tailor his chips to have those bits assigned to specific audio frequencies, whereas the other stuff, it was just flat across the board. So his stuff would, a 12-bit sampler by him would sound like a 16-bit sampler by somebody else, you know? And that's just because, you know, this guy really kind of came at this thing thinking at it from a really musical perspective. And a lot of these other engineers were really coming at it from a computer science perspective.
So who owns EMU now? Is it still Universal Audio?
Does Universal? I don't know. That's a good question. But like, here's the cool thing: is that kind of Universal Audio actually
Mickey's yelling at me because I keep saying EMU.
Mickey's jumping on you, jumping on you, son.
Like, you got Mickey over there pouring drinks. Like I wish you would cut it out.
Mickey is not wrong. I 100% agree with Mickey, and I 100% disagree with my pronunciation of EMU. I do it because it came about in the same way that like I say NES instead of NES or SNES. Like I just don't do that. But yeah, it is EMU, which is why on some of their circuit boards they actually print an EMU, and you can turn on you can make an EMU run across a screen and that sort of thing. So yes, my pronunciation is completely wrong. You should know that.
You should cut that out, bro.
Yeah, you should.
I should, but it's a bad habit, man.
It's so disrespectful. I don't even understand. But here's the thing: a lot of people don't realize it's an interesting bit to the story, and it's all related to the SP1200. Is that what became Universal Audio buying Creative Labs, which Creative Labs was EMU, and then now Dave Rossum's company, Rossum Electro, lives and has set up shop at Universal Audio.
Really? Wait, is that real? For real?
Yeah,
that's yeah. So it's an interesting thing, and I want to go back to this thing about I love this sort of idea that Rossum sort of gave his blessings and be somebody of the newer generation coming up, creating a sort of like a salute to one of the classics, like Brad is doing. And Brad mentioned in the comments, he was like, "Yo, I was scared he was going to be pissed." You know what I mean? And it turns out that he was all like just totally open. They met, and it was just like a love fest, and it was really dope to see that and to hear that. And Brad says here, even our dogs met online when we had a chat. I mean, it was just a good. It feels like, and it doesn't necessarily feel like a handoff. Like, here, young man, take the torch and run with it, because Dave Rossum is still very much in the game, and you never know what might be in the future for him. But I love the fact that there's that. It just reminds me that there's still good in the damn world.
For sure. Absolutely.
It seems very humbling, and I like that sort of thing. You know what I mean? Because who wins? We all do.
Yep.
We all win behind this. There's SP1200s out there to be had, but there's S2400 coming to be had.
There's that other thing. Yo, what's that other thing? The real, and I know we're running short on time, but like there was that small joint. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah. Hold on. I know exactly which one you're talking about.
There, so somebody was creating like a small, and I want to say it's like a Raspberry Pi project, and I'm not talking about the low hiss one, because there's also that. Yeah. There's low hiss.
That's one of them, right?
Yeah, so he's got like a little VST / it's not really a VST. I don't think it's like a web plugin or something.
Is that iPad? Oh, okay. I thought it was iPad. Okay.
I just sent it. I
haven't had time to really mess with it, and I need to, but I just haven't had time to mess with any of that stuff. But there's this other thing that's like, it's almost like, is it 4 faders or is it 1? I can't remember. I think it's 4 faders.
Yeah, it's not many. It's almost like a half of a SP1200.
Yeah, it's just
as a Raspberry Pi sort of project. It looks
fun.
Yeah, I'll find it because I definitely want to show it. Hold on, it's in here somewhere. I can't remember what it's called though. Oh, here it is. Hold on. All right, I'm gonna show you now.
I typed SP1200 Pi in Instagram, and Pi City came up, and that just sounds delicious. I need to visit that.
Oh shit!
That just made me crazy hungry. I need to find this thing. I wish I remembered the name off the top of the head. I'm sorry.
I really like it's called the SP102, and it's kind of the form factor of the SP404. Yeah. And if you go to this guy's page, it's Hypha_A. HYPHA_A on Instagram. You'll be able to see it. So he's using a Raspberry Pi, and he's kind of creating this device. And you could look through his timeline and you'll see the process, like when he did the thing out of cardboard box, and now he's, I don't know if he's going to release it as a DIY thing or if he's going to release it at all. But I think this is really dope, where imagine having something like this and an SP404 sitting next to each other for your live show. It could be some really interesting stuff going on, right? So that's what I love about something like a SP1200. Look at what it's done. Look at what's happened here. You know what I mean? But I find it a trip that we went the first 20 years of this century with you either buy a classic or nothing. Now all of a sudden there's all these options, you know what I mean, to kind of grab that sound. So yeah, this is pretty dope.
Yeah, pretty dope. That really looks good.
Yeah, it really does.
You know what's crazy, man? Like if you look at like the music, I'll just use hip hop for example, because this is where there's a problem. In hip hop, as far as MCing goes, you have to fight to tell. There's a struggle between generations. Like no one knows who did what or what things were like. When it comes to gear, now anyone that's under 18 years old actually knows what an SP1200 is, and you don't have to explain it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And there's a bridging between the fact that it's being carried on. Like there's no separation or anything like that anymore. So that's also a really good reason why these things need to be carried on. So it's just the entire lineage of gear that's being continued on through younger eyes, through a different generation. Like, it's really good.
Actually, you make a good point with that too, because I think hip hop has this crazy thing about ageism, and like, you know what I mean? Like, yo, you listen to that. If like, it's a weird thing because depending on who you're talking to, classic hip hop. And I don't want to get too deep in this conversation. This is another BeatPPL podcast, but classic hip hop in the 90s, old head. Classic hip hop in the 2000s, lo-fi. You're cool. You know what I mean?
This cuts deep on Corry because he's old.
No. That's a conversation that really needs to be had. That's a conversation that really needs to be had.
Yeah,
The
I
whole
want to get
lo-fi,
into that on the
sure.
next, and we'll probably have to have Mario back, and we can kind of really dig into that conversation. But yeah, a lot of really dope stuff on the SP1200, and I don't know, I'll just kind of open it up, man. Y'all got any things to say? Because we're over an hour. This is a good conversation, as typically these focused conversations are, though.
Yeah.
I just want to say real quick. Oh, go ahead, Mario. Go ahead.
Okay, good. No, I was gonna say, like, I'm glad that there is still this excitement for it, and that we're seeing it a lot more, not only in producers' hands, but in like that whole RZA did a great job on his Hulu thing. That even that.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Of that, like, it's crazy how that. I know that a lot of people are seeing that and being like, well, what's that? They're not. It's that whole broadening horizons for everybody, like you were saying, Daydream Sound. These kids people under 18 years old knowing what it is, and you don't have to explain it to them. So having that knowledge and building on it, so now we're getting all of these spiritual and reminiscence of the SP1200 with the plugins, and also now these new hardware. So I think it's really, really dope. And yeah, I just hope that everybody that is interested in one, they kind of have the same passion that I gained from just using it and hearing it.
That's dope.
I wanted to say real quick. So for me, as a SP enthusiast, that I don't have the money to buy a SP, but I'm intrigued by the sound. And for somebody that doesn't want to grab a bit crusher and try to get a filter and try to emulate the sound, wavetracing.com. And this is just off the top, not sponsored or nothing like that, but wavetracing.com has a SP plugin that sounds amazing. I would say if you want to hear what the SP sounds like, if you don't know about it, you could go to their website and just kind of check out their plugin. It's $20. Sounds dope. So that's all I want to say.
As a matter of fact, for that wavetracing.com, as a matter of fact, this is BeatPPL.com. That's my platform I built for Bboytech Report. Go to Bboytech Report. There's a new article up there on it, and you'll be able to link to wave tracing, but you'll learn a little something about it. It definitely is. I typically post things. I like to post news, but this is one of those things that when it comes by, I want to put it out there so people know about it, because it is a dope plugin.
It sounds good. It sounds really good. It really does.
It's the most recent article on BboytechReport.com, so definitely check that out. There was something else I was going. Somebody was saying, I think this is worth addressing here, because the SP303 and the 404, are the SP303 and 404 better at grit and dirt than the SP1200? Why are they so much cheaper? Right? Because the idea is, I think what this speaks to is that a lot of people think that the SP series of rolling boxes are related to the SP1200 somehow, and it's not beyond the fact of the SP, right?
I feel like this is a whole other show.
It is. It is. For sure it is.
I didn't even think about that.
Giving us the idea of another show. Actually, we're going to do that. I'm going to write that in my notebook.
Yeah. The 404. We need to do a 404 show.
Yeah,
it doesn't even need to be 404. It should just be SP.
SP for sure.
303. 5. He's dropping gear.
Oh, that's cool too.
Oh snap! Well, he's lo-fi,
man.
He's lo-fi.
All them rolling SPs, man.
Yeah, he's lo-fi. So
hold those back up. Hold those back up, Mario.
You're OG if you got the 202.
Oh snap! You got the 202. Woo!
With the rolling speaker. Because we all know it's rolling.
That's a true lo-fi head right there.
Yeah, no doubt.
Straight up. Yep.
So, I don't know. So I think, like I said before, here's what's dope. This is a really dope box. Some people are going to get along with the workflow. Some people are not. A lot of people love the sound and don't even know what that sound is. Like when I was chasing a certain synthesizer sound, I didn't realize until years later of learning about synthesis that the sound I've been chasing is a Model D. You know what I mean? And not every synth could do that. And I think it's the same way with a lot of this. A lot of times people are like, yo, I want it to punch more. I want it to be like warmer and punchier, grittier. And a lot of times I don't think people realize that they're probably referring to an SP1200 sound. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think dope that kind of stuff is coming to light. I think it's dope that Dave Rossum is a name that was spoken in such a beautiful light on the show because he deserves all the props. He's a legend. The dude designed the chips and everything on up. You know what I mean? And created this incredibly dope box. And then now it's doing Eurorack. And what's dope about that, the Dave Rossum Eurorack stuff, that sampler, the assimilator, the assimilator sounds so good, people expected it to be a SP1200 in Eurorack form. It's not that. But it sounds incredibly good. And here's what he did in the manual. He put in the manual the different settings that you could put on the assimilated Eurorack sampler to make it sound like all the different versions of EMU samplers that he has and the SP1200.
That's crazy.
And when I did it, I was like, whoa, my mind was blown because you can get that sound and you could save it. You know what I mean?
Wow, that's crazy.
So SP1200 is a classic joint. For those that don't know, refer to this show. And with that, I want to say thanks to Mario.
We may end up doing a second part as well.
I think all these shows might get a part two. So you may get the invite again, Mario and Daydream Sound, specifically about this SP1200. But yeah, thank y'all for coming on, man. Because I know I couldn't do this show without having a couple guys on that literally has them in their possession. Whether I've had or touched one before is a different deal than living with it, using it, and having an opinion on it from that perspective. So thanks for coming on the show. And Ken and Bryce, anything y'all want to say in closing? And also Mario and Daydream Sound, anything y'all want to say in closing?
Thank you for having me.
I'm gonna be on Perfect Circuit Audio's YouTube and Instagram channel on Monday, and there's a couple of chumps that are going to be on there with us.
Oh snap!
This dude,
he called them
Steele,
chumps.
Well, this dude flaked on the show today. So D Steele, he might be there. There's some guy from MSX Audio.
That's true.
Some guy, Bboytech Report, who's just about late for this show today. I mean, whatever. He's gonna be there. Travarsi's gonna be there, and I'm gonna be there. So we're all doing beat sets, and I'm sure all of our beat sets are gonna be very different. But we're gonna be using totally different sample. We're gonna be using the Force. On Perfect Circuit Audio's YouTube, so you can check that out. That's Monday, 9 p.m. Eastern is when that starts.
6 p.m. Pacific.
Yeah.
There you go.
West Coast.
Cold water time.
Yeah, cool.
So yeah, definitely check that out, and I'd appreciate to see some kind comments.
Yeah, that's gonna be dope.
I'm sure my beats are gonna be horrible.
Oh, shout out to Daydream Sound and Flux. What?
Only. That's funny. I know. He's like, yo, shout out to those two.
Yeah.
My man.
Hey, Ken's head is too big. Is there a way we can just like shut him down right now? Can we like just
I'm kicking him out right now.
Ask me about how to make offbeat beats.
And by the way, as we get out of here, we're going to close the show out. I want to just remind you all to whether you're watching this on my channel or Flux's channel, be sure to hit like, be sure to hit subscribe, be sure to share, because we're doing this for the community and it's fun to do it, and we want to talk to as many people as we can. So support the channel in any way that you can, support the channels in any way you can, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
Peace,
everyone.